bienvenidos. Welcome to the virtual Nature for Life Hub. My name is Daniel Perez, and it is my distinct pleasure to be your guide for the next 4 days of conversation, engagement, and most of all, commitment to action around nature. Today, we open our multi-day event with a focus on the ways in which nature underpins the Sustainable Development Goals, which is why today is called the SDG Day. Without further ado, let me officially announce the start of the Nature for Life Hub with our first session, Nature for Climate, highlighting the role of nature in climate change mitigation and adaptation. Enjoy!
Hello everyone, Namaste, Hola, greetings from India. Absolutely honored to perform for you today at the Nature for Life Hub. Now, as we all know, we are facing a triple planetary emergency, a nature crisis, a climate crisis, and an inequality crisis, and all three are interconnected. We cannot look at them in isolation. Now, we are on the edge of tipping points on all three fronts, with every passing day a huger risk of planetary breakdown. Now, nature loss is dangerously accelerating this breakdown. We urgently need to reset our relationship with nature. We have to constantly remind ourselves that we are not the only species on this planet. We're just one among millions and millions of species, and all of us have to live in absolute peace and absolute harmony with nature for our own survival and prosperity. Now, to secure the future we want, we need to completely rethink our socio-economic models and how we interact with nature. Now, 2020 needs to be a turning point for a decade of action starting now. Now, more than ever, we need to be connected and united in this fight. Now is the time to create a better future for all. Now, even though COVID-19 has pretty much paralyzed our world and prevents us from being physically together, now more than ever, and through this amazing Nature for Life Hub, we need to form a global front to be connected and united to foster profound change on our global models. We have to put nature at the heart of sustainable development and green recovery, and I believe music can be our catalyst. Now, here is our song celebrating the joy of life and our land. We have with us the Senegalese legend Baba Mal, who is famously the voice of Wakanda in the Black Panther movie. We have Lonnie Park from New York. We have Grammy Award winner Wouter Kellerman from South Africa, the Zanzi Youth Choir from Soweto, and IP Singh from India. This is the official UNCCD land anthem. Here is Born from the Land.
We all want to know we'll always have a home, a solid ground beneath our feet. The earth we walk upon, build our homes upon, she can provide our every need. But we need to stop and look around and marvel at all its beauty. Let's celebrate the joy of life. Oh, we're born from the land. Oh, you and I and all of life. Oh, we're born from the land. Yeah. Let's celebrate the joy of life. Oh, we're born from the land. And all of life, oh, we're born from the land.
Someone did a lady ma. Someone that could a lady ma. Someone did a lady ma. Someone that could a lady ma.
Oh, let's celebrate the joy of life. Oh, we're born from the land. Oh, you and I and all of life. Oh, we're born from the land. Yes, we are. मैनू जो भी चाहिदा तेरे पैरां दे है थल्ले पिया सोचता जरा उस तरह हो दुनिया होवे जिस तरह दिल तेरा Let's celebrate the joy of life We're born from the land You and I and all of life We're born from the land Yes we are Let's celebrate the joy of life We're born from the land You and I and all of life We're born from the land We're born from the land
We are facing a planetary emergency.
We're facing a biodiversity emergency. We're on track to lose 1 million species by 2050, and we're eroding the very foundations of life.
We are facing a climate emergency. We are dangerously close to tipping points, and we are on the brink of climate breakdown. Losing nature means accelerating this breakdown.
We are facing an inequality emergency. More than 70% of humanity lives on less than $10 a day, while the world's richest 1% own twice the wealth of all humanity combined. The way we are consuming and producing goods creates a water crisis, a food crisis, a pollution crisis.
While the loss of nature might often seem far away, it connects all of us, causing disruption, devastation, and hardship.
The current health crisis is fueled by deforestation and the degradation of nature, as well as unsustainable wildlife and food practices.
We're facing the first pandemic in this century, but perhaps not the last in our lifetime.
It is time to create a better future for all.
It's time for action, a decade of action, starting now.
It is a time of opportunity to build forward better, greener, and to rewire our economies.
It is time to restore our relationship with nature.
We
must take
bold steps, starting right now.
We must place nature firmly at the heart of sustainable development for food and water,
For health and safety,
for jobs and livelihoods.
we must strengthen the rule of law and protect the rights of people who are most vulnerable to biodiversity loss, the people who are defending their territories and safeguarding our future.
We must transform our financial systems to understand, value, and disclose their impacts and dependencies on nature. And we must drive financial flows towards solutions that benefit both people and planet.
We must transform how we make and consume goods by showing that losing nature is a business risk. And we must build green and inclusive and circular economy, an economy that works for everyone. We must mobilize action from every corner of society,
asking for big, bold ambition from the world's governments to conserve, restore, and sustainably use nature.
Seeking unwavering commitments from the world's businesses to become nature positive.
pledging to become thoughtful consumers and making space for nature in our choices, and working together to transform the world to a greener, brighter place.
We are facing a planetary emergency, and it's time for a global collective response. The future of our planet, our future, and the future of our children's great-grandchildren lies in the decisions we take in the next 10 years.
It's time to act for nature.
Over the next 4 days, we will bring together hundreds of individuals who are acting for nature wherever they are.
Politicians, government officials, business leaders, financiers,
Indigenous peoples, scientists, activists,
communicators, consumers, parents, teenagers,
everybody. They're working hard to create the future we want.
We invite you to join us
as we look to this coming decade
For
for a decade of
action
action
on
on
nature.
nature.
Thank you.
Hello, welcome to Nature for Climate in Action. I'm Lucy Almond and I'm speaking to you from my home in a small village in the UK, with fingers firmly crossed that my rural broadband will hold out for the next hour. I lead the Nature for Climate Coalition, a group of 16 international organisations housed in the Nature Conservancy. We work together to mobilise action on nature-based solutions. We've been going for 3 years, and it's incredible to see how far natural climate solutions have come. We've moved from the so-called forgotten solution to the centre of the climate debate. As Christiana Figueres said last week, just as we have a right hand and a left hand, we need decarbonisation and natural climate solutions. But there is still a long way to unlock their potential, which is why today's session is so urgent. I'd like to thank UNDP for having the vision, the diplomatic skills, and the bravery to put on 4 days of virtual programming, and also for opening up these events to a much broader audience. You are all welcome. My role, if all goes to plan, is the easy one. Later, I will introduce a series of short films sent to us by people all over the world, true heroes of nature and climate. Now, we're not naive enough to think most of you won't be multitasking at some point. Ever since COVID-19 turned our worlds upside down, most of us are missing the usual levels of social interaction. But as a substitute of sorts, you can always turn to Twitter. Please join us online, follow the hashtag #NatureForLife, and tweet along live. We're delighted to have a wonderful live speaker lineup, with the CEO of the Nature Conservancy, Jennifer Morris, the UK's Minister for Pacific and the Environment, Lord Goldsmith, the new chair of the Global Environment Facility, Carlos Manuel Rodriguez, and the CEO of Conservation International, M. Sanjayan. First, I'd like to show you a powerful 1-minute film that invites us all to pause and imagine the future we are trying to build. Thousands of people have contributed with simple voice recordings and selfies, all during lockdown. The creative team behind this are gripping films, and you should be able to spot a few famous faces, including Pope Francis and Greta Thunberg. For those who might be photosensitive, this film contains flashing images, so please close your eyes and just listen. For those of you who want to watch, you can now join the 1 million people who have seen this film since it launched on Monday, and imagine the future you want. Thank you.
This could be the most important minute of your day.
We have been through difficult times
and face big problems ahead.
But every crisis contains both danger and opportunity.
You can play your part.
Right now.
Right now.
Puzzles, please close your eyes. Imagine the better future we could have.
Imagine that future.
What does it look like for you?
for the people you love.
How do we lift each other up
and make it fair?
How do we protect nature
and save our shared home? Picture that future you want.
Now open your eyes.
It's time to talk about the future we want.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Jennifer Morris, CEO of the Nature Conservancy. Those of us here today know all too well that our climate emergency, if left unchecked, will continue to contribute to more frequent and intense storms, more hunger, more heat, more devastation of lands, waters, and species. But today, let's do as the video suggested and talk about the future we want to see, not just the future we want to avoid. We want to see a planet restored and regreened, where our children have clean air to breathe and fresh water to drink, where Indigenous people and local communities are at the heart of a green recovery, where finance flows to practices that help, not hurt, our planet, where governments put nature at the heart of decision-making, and where a stable climate supports our planet's incredible diversity of life. These are not pipe dreams. These are goals that we can unlock within our lifetime. And one key to unlocking those goals is nature herself. For the next hour, we will be talking about natural climate solutions, proven strategies that leverage nature's power to store and absorb carbon. Scientists have found that by protecting and restoring forests, wetlands, and grasslands, and better managing lands for agriculture and forestry, we can deliver just over 1/3 of global emissions reductions needed to hold global warming below 2 degrees Celsius by 2030. What's more, these strategies yield other big rewards. Healthy mangroves offer protection against storms and sea level rise, and forests protect soils, filter water, prevent landslides, and reduce urban heat. The science around natural climate solutions is improving all the time, showing us not only what these strategies can do, but where they have the greatest potential. In fact, just yesterday, the Nature Conservancy and World Resource Institute and many other partners published a paper that helps pinpoint the exact locations on the planet with the greatest carbon storage potential from natural forest regrowth. So we know that natural climate solutions can work and where they work best. Now it's time to talk about how we take these solutions to scale. The first step is already in place: radical collaboration. Thank you all for being here today for this critical conversation. We need all hands on deck: governments, companies, civil society groups, and communities. You are the change makers who can ensure nature is a key part of the climate solution. Second, we need leadership. We need countries to step up with clear national climate pledges that incorporate nature into their nationally determined contributions, or NDCs. In the past week, we've seen the European Union and China step up in a big way, strengthening their NDCs, including their commitments to natural climate solutions. These economic leaders represent about 35% of global emissions, and they are paving the way for other countries to increase their ambition. Chile also updated their NDC earlier this year, doubling their targets for sustainable forest management and restoration. Additionally, they set targets to cut emissions from deforestation and land degradation by 25% by 2030. This is leadership, and this is progress. But if we're going to meet these kinds of ambitious targets, we need private sector leadership too. Thankfully, we are seeing many large corporations lead the way on deploying nature-based solutions, both within their own supply chains and as offsets for hard-to-abate emissions in the near term. For example, last year, Amazon announced the $100 million Right Now Climate Fund to advance natural climate solutions as part of the company's efforts to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2040. The first investment is supporting sustainable management and restoration across a 4 million acre network of family forests in the Appalachian Mountains, United States. This program is keeping carbon in the ground, protecting wildlife, and providing forest owners access to carbon markets to earn additional revenue. And finally, we need to accelerate investments. We are enormously encouraged by commitments like Amazon's and just this week's Walmart's. Now we need to build on this momentum and continue to accelerate funding for natural climate solutions. Since launching the Nature for Climate Coalition in 2017 with 15 other amazing global partners, we've seen growing momentum. Prior to 2017, Natural Climate Solutions received less than 3% of public climate finance. Today, that number has grown to around 8%. So we're headed in the right direction, but an increase of only 5% in 3 years isn't scaling fast enough to meet the opportunity nature provides to solve the climate emergency. That means increased natural climate solutions investments for developing countries through mechanisms like the Green Climate Fund. It means stronger policies to incentivize private investment in natural climate solutions. And it means getting creative through mechanisms such as debt for nature swaps that help debt-strapped economies, an increasing number under COVID, to free up capital to invest in nature. Over the next year, we must come together as governments, corporate leaders, communities, and voters to make every change necessary that brings nature and climate into the heart of all decision-making. The planet is counting on us. I am now delighted to hand over to Lord Goldsmith, the UK's Minister of State for the Pacific and the Environment, who has worked tirelessly to build the political support needed for tackling the planetary emergency.
It's a real pleasure to be speaking to you all today on behalf of the United Kingdom about how helping nature recover can be a major part of the solution to the biggest challenges that we face. This pandemic has brutally exposed our vulnerabilities, economically, of course, but with any luck, it will also serve as a wake-up call. Coronavirus is very likely the consequence of our abuse of nature, but it will be dwarfed by others. Only this month, we learned that populations of key species have declined by more than 2/3 in my lifetime, which is a mere nanosecond in evolutionary terms. Everything from marine leviathans to chameleons, small enough to balance on the head of a match. Around 1 million species currently face extinction. Every minute, the world loses approximately 30 football pitches worth of forests, making deforestation a leading cause of climate change. Or let me put it another way. The Earth is 4.6 billion years old. If we scale that back to a year, we've been around for less than 1 hour. Our industrial revolution began much less than a minute ago. And in under 1 second, we've destroyed more than half the world's tropical forests. As a species, we've been blessed with really extraordinary cleverness. But unless we couple that cleverness with wisdom, we're going to pay a terrible price, because what we're doing makes as little sense ecologically as it does economically. It is, of course, the world's poorest people who suffer first and worst when the free but rarely valued services that nature provides begin to fail. But all of us depend fundamentally on the natural world around us, and turning this trajectory around is surely the principal challenge of our age. On Monday, the UN will be asking leaders, including our own Prime Minister, to pledge their commitment to 10 urgent actions to reverse the decline of nature by 2030, to acknowledge the failures of so many previous declarations, and to explicitly invite every generation to judge leaders on whether they honor their word. And I'm proud that the UK has been a leading voice in helping to craft that pledge. But we need to turn those powerful words into action. At the CBD COP in Kunming, we need to agree targets to reverse biodiversity loss. And those targets need to be underpinned by robust implementation plans and meaningful accountability. At the Climate COP in Scotland, we will build on the success of the Paris COP and galvanize global action to tackle climate change. And the thread that runs through both of them is, of course, nature, the subject of today's brilliant event. Because alongside global efforts to mobilize finance, increase action on adaptation and resilience, and shift to cleaner forms of energy, transport, housing, we know that we will need global action to reverse the damage we're doing to the natural world. There is no pathway to net zero emissions or the Sustainable Development Goals without reversing the decline of the natural world. Unfortunately, the market is already racing ahead of the politics in relation to clean energy and transport. The cost of renewables is falling far faster than anyone predicted, and zero emissions vehicles are on the cusp of becoming mainstream. But technology alone is not going to prevent climate change. Nature-based solutions like protecting and restoring mangroves, forests, and peatlands could provide around a third of the most cost-effective climate change solution we need, while also helping communities adapt to become more resilient. But nature-based solutions, despite their huge potential contribution, attract a measly 3% of global climate finance, and that just makes no sense at all. So the UK will use our presidency of COP26 to persuade other countries to put nature at the heart of their climate response, as we are doing in the UK. We've doubled our international climate finance, and we're going to increase the proportion that is spent on nature-based solutions, and we're encouraging other countries to do similarly. At home, we've committed in law to net zero emissions by 2050, and we're introducing landmark legislation to reverse our own dramatic biodiversity loss. Internationally, we're rolling out ambitious new programs focusing on land and sea, a new £500 million Blue Planet Fund financed from the UK's official development assistance budget, which will help protect marine ecosystems from climate change, marine pollution, overfishing, and habitat loss. Our Blue Belt program is on track now to protect an area of ocean in marine protected areas roughly the size of India around our overseas territories. We're leading a campaign to protect at least 30% of the global ocean by 2030. More than 30 countries have signed up, and I invite every country to do so. And we're soon to launch our new £100 million Biodiverse Landscapes Fund to protect biodiversity hotspots in 5 critically important landscapes, like the Kavango-Zambezi river basins spanning 5 nations and home to half the continent's remaining savanna elephants. But public money alone, as we've already heard, is not going to solve the problem. Governments do, however, hold powerful levers to make markets value nature and attach a cost to environmental destruction, and they need to use them. So we're working with international partners to create a market-led task force for nature-related financial disclosure, complementing that for climate, to help businesses understand and reduce environmental risk. And we're taking on the perverse incentives that also drive destruction. Around the world, the top 50 food-producing countries spend around $700 billion annually on often destructive land use subsidies. That's roughly 4 times all the world's aid budget combined. In the UK, we're replacing our land use subsidies with a new system that rewards good stewardship of the land. And if we can persuade other countries to do the same and to work with us, we can flip the market in favor of sustainability. We're working through the Just Rural Transition to support that transition to sustainability. We've committed £120 million to Partnerships for Forests, working with the Tropical Forest Alliance to help the sustainable rubber and honey trade in Sumatra, for instance, support livelihoods, protect carbon-rich sinks, and save tigers and orangutans at the same time. Now, globally, agriculture causes around 80% of deforestation, and much of that is for growing commodities like palm oil, soya, cocoa, and so on. So the UK has launched a new and ambitious consultation on a due diligence requirement on big companies to remove deforestation from their supply chains. And as COP26 presidents, we'll be bringing other countries together around the table, producer countries, consumer countries, north, south, east, and west, so that together we can shift the market to make forests worth more alive than dead. The UK is committed to providing leadership, and we recognize we have more to do, but we also recognize that we cannot do it alone. We're asking governments to come to Glasgow with genuinely ambitious, nationally determined contributions. And we're calling on businesses, investors, cities, regions, and universities to join the race to zero too. We're using this extended run-up to Glasgow and Kunming to build alliances of countries willing to go much further on targets to protect land and sea, on supply chains, on land use subsidies, on commitments to net zero emissions, and to dramatically increase support for nature-based solutions. This is clearly the moment for a seismic shift. With some $12 trillion identified for the task of rebuilding our economies after coronavirus, governments now have a choice. We can prop up the status quo, locking in decades of carbon emissions and environmental destruction, or we can turn this grim experience to something good by making sustainability and resilience the lens through which we map out our respective recoveries. Now, I think we have a duty to every single generation to come to profoundly reset our relationship with this, the only planet that can sustain us. Thank you so much for the work that you do, and thank you for inviting me along today.
Good morning. Thank you so much to the UNDP for inviting us to be in this event and organizing this series of webinars and event. And of course, my thanks to my dear friend Jennifer Morris and Lord Goldsmith. This year was very, very different to what we initially thought of. This is the year that we come to realize that the relationship between humans and nature is totally broken. And yes, we've been hearing about, we're living in the Anthropocene. But for many people in the planet, the Anthropocene seems like something distant and even abstract. Nowadays, people come to realize that, yes, we're living in the Anthropocene. And this new reality can mean more forest fires, more extreme weather events, more pandemics, and even worse, more socially inequality. And based on the fact that we all come to realize how vulnerable we are, we need to really understand how do we, as a global society, become more resilient to social inequality, more resilient to the lack of opportunities, more resilient to the lack of good governance, and lack of democratic governments in the planet. But most importantly, how do we become more resilient to the environmental challenges in front of us? And at the same time that we all realize that we are living in the Anthropocene, and the Anthropocene can be a very difficult time for humans, following the narrative of Lord Goldsmith. We need to understand that we have great opportunities to be able to live in a very green, sustainable Anthropocene. And this means that we need to act very quickly in three directions, which for me are great. During the last month, we have read many very interesting reports. Some reports telling us on the state of biodiversity and the loss of it and the impacts of climate change. But on the other side, something very interesting has happened with many of the reports that I've been reading, or we all have been reading in the last 2-3 months, which is the fact that there's a very strong economic narrative and rationale behind protecting nature. This is kind of the piece that I didn't saw before, because we had the resources, the global resources, to really mobilize like never before and be able to do the shift towards a more sustainable way of consumption and productions. And we had the technology. Already we had the technology. But we didn't have the strong economic narrative and the financial data that we have today. For the first time in our history, we got the information that is key to be provided to policymakers, so they can really begin generating the balance within the short-term actions and aspirations with the longer-term solutions towards sustainability. Today, we know how much money, resources we need to be mobilizing in terms to be on the 1.5 climate track. We know how much resources we need to invest to be able to do what Lord Goldsmith recommended us to protect 30% of the oceans and the planet. And we got good ideas on how to mobilize resources in a more efficient way. So 3 things here are key in the next decade, and the GEF is really focusing and concentrating, supporting countries to do those 3 things. 1, we need to do major institutional reform at the government level. We cannot be able to do the leap forward in terms of sustainability with the same institutional framework that in first place created the problem that we want to solve today. We need to redesign agencies and move towards an institutional landscape, seascape approach, avoiding working on sector and silos. The second element, we need to mobilize resources, financial resources from all sources, but and particularly the domestic sources. There is no resources, non-fiscal resources, possibilities to be able to mobilize at the domestic level, country level, and we need to do that. At the same time that we mobilize domestic resources, we need, and this is probably one of the most important areas where that can give us benefit, is mapping up all the national and local perverse incentives, negative investment, and subsidies that we have in place that contribute to to the destruction of nature. Phasing down those policies are really important. It is not easy because behind a subsidy, there's a group of interest, but we need to do that. And the third element, not less important, in the context of mobilizing resources and the financing of nature, is using nature as a cost-effective way to deal with climate change, loss of biodiversity, and social development. For every dollar we invest in nature, their return in terms of climate and mitigation and adaptation is high. The return on social development and human well-being is high. And these are areas where the GF will be concentrating, particularly on the next replenishment process, on our next operational cycle that will begin next year. And I strongly believe that the GF will be the partner of choice in this new normality. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Carlos Manuel, for your enduring leadership in these areas. Now's the time when we all get to relax a little in front of the screen with 4 10-minute segments of short films made by indigenous communities, youth groups, civil society, businesses, and governments. All of these inspirational people are true natural climate leaders, working on solutions at the scale, pace, and integrity needed. And all these were contributed at very short notice, for which we're grateful. The first selection highlights 3 new initiatives covering the vast geographies of Africa, the US, and China. The first will explain how 6 African countries are restoring 2 million hectares of degraded lands. The second focuses on the launch of the US chapter of Nature for Climate and provides an insight into how America's natural and working lands can play a crucial role in climate action. And the third features a new nature-based solutions platform launching in China, and where we will hear about efforts to restore habitat for monkeys, the regreening of the home of the panda, and from an inner Mongolian herding community. Enjoy the films.
Our planet is at breaking point. Our fast-paced world has forced a disconnect with Mother Nature. We are depleting our resources, laying waste to lands, and contaminating life-giving oceans. We are destroying our planet, our home. We have reached a point where we can't afford not to act. But if you look closer, you'll see that we don't need to go far to fix what we have broken. The solution to one of the world's biggest problems is under our feet. Deep beneath the surface, there's a hidden world, the underground forest. Often, unassuming barren lands have the potential to regenerate into productive ecosystems. In one simple act, trees that lay dormant can release the untapped energy of their root systems, restoring a cycle of degradation to a cycle of regeneration. The massive task of greening up our lands to cool down the planet is already underway. Across the African continent, 6 countries have come together to protect what's left and restore what's lost. From the ground up, thousands of communities, NGOs, and local governments are working to green up and scale up. Harnessing the most impactful approaches, local knowledge and collaboration, we can ignite a movement that empowers people. By breaking down the barriers of food insecurity and elevating livelihoods, we can reset the course for future generations. Change is here. By the people, for the people.
My name is Kaluki Paul Mutuku. I'm based out of Kenya, and I'm the Global Youth Ambassador for the Global Evergreening Alliance. My main missions being to link the alliance to local groups that are implementing on farmer-managed natural regeneration, but also other regenerative and restorative activities from Kenya and by large across the African region. There is no work that can be done by anyone alone in the fight against the climate change and the biodiversity crisis. We are all connected, both from the natural world, but also as a human species. So then coming together through this program and working in our different perspectives with our different backgrounds and bringing together the different skills, it's an asset that we must bring together. So really, no one man can do it all. We need every hand on deck, and we need all action on the ground for us to realize the fruits of this super program for Africa. Lands are getting that less arable for agriculture, biodiversity is getting lost every day. And so this is a very important program for Africa, for it is needed indeed to secure people's lives, but also ensure that there is no further biodiversity loss in the continent. Implementing this program means to us in Africa that we'll be able to meet the needs of the growing populations, we'll be able to feed our people, we'll be able to protect our communities from exposures to disease and disease outbreaks, and we will be able to give our youth, who are actually one of the biggest populations in Africa, a new opportunity to deal with nature while also benefiting from it in a sustainable way. The outcomes that we hope to see out of the Restore Africa program are that we'll have restored ecosystems, we will have thriving biodiversity, we will have healthy communities and communities that have sustainable livelihoods that don't necessarily extract from nature without giving back. On the flip side, we will have communities that are contributing towards biodiversity conservation, towards local livelihoods, while also protecting what they care most for, which is the environment.
My name is Irene Ojuok. I work with World Vision Kenya as the Environment and Climate Change Advisor. If there was an opportunity to turn things around in a minute, I know it is central in the heart of Evergreening Alliance to get this world green in a minute, if that was possible. But of course, we have to go through that journey together, and we have to make it practical. It cannot just be a gospel spoken at national and global forums. We have to put it down, and the communities have to embrace this vision because they are the most at risk. We are getting more floods. We recently had the locust invasion. We have never seen this since, I think, I can't, since I was born, there's nothing like that I've ever imagined except reading in the Bible that there were some plagues that took place. But we are becoming more real with the climate challenges today. and it calls for more action and more commitment by each and every one of us, wherever we are placed. So championing a community movement to drive this agenda is the greatest investment Evergreening Alliance is putting, because at the end of the day, we are really mainly just, regreening their hearts. They have the solutions. This is where FMNR becomes a very central approach. People are able to deal with the issues they have as much as they are alert and aware and empowered to know that they are able to do it. Sometimes we feel weak because you think you can't do much, but when you see an example, when you when you are encouraged, you are empowered, you take up the first step, the second you will be able to run with it. So that's the spirit Evergreening Alliance is putting in communities, putting in government, putting within partners, and influencing change from within our hearts so that we can drive this agenda more positively.
When it comes to tackling climate change, it's an all hands on deck effort. We've got to reduce carbon emissions from fossil fuels, but we've also got to do something about the greenhouse gases already in our atmosphere.
That's the only way we're going to reach net zero emissions by 2050. How do we do this? By putting America's natural and working lands, our farms and ranches, our forests, our grasslands and our wetlands to work in the effort to tackle climate change.
Trees are natural carbon removal machines. By protecting forests, planting more trees, and changing how we manage forest land, we can kick those machines into high gear.
Farmers and ranchers across America have been and continue to be part of the solution to climate change. That's why many are voluntarily adopting climate-smart farming and ranching techniques that store more carbon and improve soil health, making our land more productive and our communities more vibrant.
America is ready to take action. America is ready to lead.
That's why we're so proud to announce the launch of U.S. Nature for Climate, to shine a light on these amazing efforts here in the United States to deliver natural climate solutions.
U.S. Nature for Climate is a broad coalition of conservation organizations, businesses who care about sustainability, and agriculture and forestry leaders.
By working together, we can turn climate risk into rewards for today and future generations.
At the end of the day, we recognize we cannot stop climate change without nature. Learn more about how you can join with us at www.usnatureforclimate.org.
Hi everyone, I'm JiaBin Huang, based in Beijing, China. I worked for Institute of Climate Change and Sustainable Development at Tsinghua University, led by Mr. Xie Zhenghua, China's Special Representative on Climate Change Affairs. China is the co-lead of NBS working stream invited by UN. But NBS is still a new concept for the local multi-stakeholders. So ICCSD set up an NBS platform supported by TNC. They are our partner representatives.
My name is Zhang Xiaoquan. I'm now in the Laojunshan National Park in the northwest Yunnan province. Our project is to restore the habitat of the Yunnan goat monkey using NBS approach. This time, we come here to look at the potential corridors of the habitat, trying to restore the habitat using reforestation, and to introduce NBS concept to more stakeholders, getting them involved in our project.
I'm Wei Qili, working in a local think tank based in Chengdu, China, the hometown of Panda.
I'm working with the local government, NGO, and some private sector to see how to address the climate change in a nature-friendly way approach.
Hi, I'm Sarah from Inner Mongolia in China. I was born in a Mongolian herder's family in the vast grassland. I've loved the grassland ever since I was born. I'm working together with local government, NGOs, and herders community to protect grassland, improve livelihood, so that they have enhanced the capacity to tackle climate change.
I'm Zhang Shangchen, an undergraduate from Xi'an, China. I'm organizing an inter-university MUN conference that gathers young people from China, France, Nigeria, India, Malaysia, and so on, to provide solutions on NBS in our local communities and popularize them worldwide.
CX-NBS is a public-private action platform aimed to utilize our unique geographic advantage to connect grassroots Chinese organizations to international decision makers in delivering China's leadership role in NBS.
Inspiring stories from all over the world. Now we turn to politics. Without government action on nature and climate, our efforts here will fail. And you've heard from all our speakers that we've run out of time, and governments need to take the lead in creating policies that will incentivize nature-based solutions. As Manuel Pulgar Vidal from WWF explains, we need political will, enhanced national climate pledges, and finance to make this happen. We will also hear from champions in this field, from Norway, which has been at the forefront of efforts to stop deforestation and restore our landscapes, and from Emergent, set up to accelerate the speed and scale of public and private support for forest conservation. Not featured today, but announced yesterday, was the news that Norway has provided universal access to satellite images that are so detailed you can see if a single tree has been cut down, which will revolutionize tropical forest monitoring. We will also hear from the Chinese government, which is emerging as a key player in nature-based solutions, and from Ecuador, which has just received for the first time results-based payment from the Green Climate Fund for emissions reductions from forests. Enjoy the films.
Dear friends, the situation is dire. Our ecosystems are quickly deteriorating. Biodiversity is lost at an alarming pace. We must take urgent action to conserve, restore, and more sustainably use our nature. Protecting nature is fundamental for sustainable development. It is also a key to climate change mitigation. According to the International Biodiversity Panel, nature-based solutions could provide up to 37% of the climate change mitigation needed until 2030 if we are to keep global warming below 1.5 degrees. This will give massive co-benefits for biodiversity. Nature-based solutions should therefore be at the center of attention at the Biodiversity COP in Kunming and the Climate COP in Glasgow next fall. Earlier this year, Norway was among the first countries to submit an enhanced climate target under the Paris Agreement, stepping up our 2030 climate goal to a reduction of at least 50%. We now need others to do the same. The COVID-19 pandemic highlights the close relationship between the health of ecosystems and of the health of mankind. Avoiding deforestation is essential to prevent the next pandemic. Several tropical forest countries are already moving decisively to slash deforestation. Major international companies are showing a keen interest in joining the effort to halt and reverse deforestation. Financing tropical forests is among the best investments humanity can make. Strong, objective standards for measuring and verifying reduced emissions from deforestation are key to unlock large-scale finance. By matching enhanced forest country ambitions with high-integrity standards and scaled-up private finance, we could end tropical deforestation once and for all. Let's mobilize governments and the private sector, use nature as the climate solution, and as a major co-benefit, prevent the next global zoonotic pandemic. Thank you.
I'm Aaron Blumgarten, Executive Director of the Emergent Forest Finance Accelerator. At Emergent, our mission is to use the power of carbon markets to protect the Earth's tropical forests at unprecedented scale, to move the needle as far and as fast as possible. Emergent is a nonprofit that works directly with governments of tropical forest countries who are taking real and demonstrable actions to protect their forests. These reductions in deforestation can be measured and converted into carbon credits by verifying them to a new global third-party standard called TREES under the Architecture for REDD+ transactions. Emergent then partners with some of the world's leading brands, companies that want the highest and most rigorous carbon credits to meet their climate objectives. These companies want credits that lead to real results, real change, real protection for our forests, for the communities that depend on them, and for the priceless biodiversity and carbon stocks that they protect. Emergent exists to create that confidence, to ensure that emission reductions are real and that funds are directed to where they will have the most impact. Forests and nature can be up to a third of the climate solution, yet they receive less than 5% of climate finance. In the fight against climate change, in our struggle to reach the goals of the Paris Agreement, there is simply no viable pathway without reversing deforestation and protecting the world's forests. When we lose forests, they are often gone forever. We must protect them for ourselves and for future generations. Emergent was created for this mission, to invest to protect nature now.
I am delighted to record this video in the context of the Nature for Life Hub. And it is to talk about nature-based solutions, that as we know, it is emerging as a huge opportunity that can make us able to build a nexus in between nature and climate and can make us able to converge. But we have in our hands three main challenges. The first one is that we do need to have political decisions. And we expect to have in COP26 on climate and COP15 on biodiversity a strong political decision to continue pushing nature-based solutions. But also, and this is the second, we will need to mainstream nature-based solutions into the NDCs. As we know, just 14 countries have put on the table an enhanced NDC, and just 8 of those have included nature-based solutions. There are good examples in Chile, Ecuador, Suriname, and Jamaica. We at WWF have published an NDC checklist that can make us able to follow what is happening. And finally, we do need to continue pushing for more public funds. Just 3% of public funds have directed to nature-based solutions. So I hope that during these days, we can discuss about these three main challenges and make nature-based solutions a strong reality.
My name is Paulo Proaño, Minister of Environment and Water of Ecuador. I am pleased to inform you that for the first time, Ecuador received result-based payments from the pilot program for RED Plus of the Green Climate Fund, GCF. This constitutes a recognition for national achievements in terms of emission reductions for deforestation. Last week, we launched officially the RED Plus result-based payments project after a virtual participatory and stakeholder engagement process successfully carried out through the UNDP Spark Blue platform. With this financing, the Ministry of Environment and Water will continue the implementation of the National RED Plus Action Plan in order to promote forest conservation and sustainable agriculture production systems, in prioritizing areas nationwide, complementing the efforts carried out through Pro Amazonia program. These efforts will lead us to achieve our commitments under the NDC. Soon, Ecuador will have new results on emissions reductions from RED Plus implementation. So we hope to receive the support from countries in order to continue working on projects aimed at protecting our forests. So we make a call to continue capitalizing the GCF in results-based payments now that funding from the pilot program is running out. Thank you very much.
尊敬的阿奇姆·斯泰勒先生、英格·安德森女士、伊丽莎白·穆雷马女士、女士们、先生们、朋友们，我很荣幸代表中国生态环境部和生物多样性公约 COP15 东道国和主席国参加这次会议。气候变化和生物多样性丧失是人类当前面临的重大挑战，它关系到联合国2030年可持续发展目标的实现，关系到人类如何在这个星球上存续。中国政府高度重视生态文明建设，坚定不移走生态优先、绿色发展的道路，并且把应对气候变化、保护生物多样性作为生态文明建设的重要内容，与国际社会一道，共同积极应对全球性挑战。2019年联合国气候行动峰会上，中国和新西兰联合牵头了基于自然的解决方案，也就是 NBS 的主题倡议，推动生态环境领域的 NBS 行动。生态文明建设理念与 NBS 高度契合，都是通过尊重自然、顺应自然、保护自然，进而发挥自然的潜力，最终实现人与自然的和谐共生。中国不断加强生态系统的保护和修复，并且取得了积极成效。目前，中国划定的生态保护红线面积约占陆域国土面积的 25%， 覆盖了所有生物多样性保护生态功能区，超过 90% 的陆地自然生态系统类型， 89% 的国家重点保护野生动植物种类得到了保护，固碳量约占全国总固碳量的近 45%。 此外中国通过天然林养护、植树造林、退耕还林等措施，为全球森林恢复和地球增绿做出了积极贡献。中国对长江流域实行为期10年的禁渔计划，海洋伏季休渔制度实施范围占到中国海域面积的 72%。 现实一再提醒我们，面对全球性挑战，人类是一荣俱荣、一损俱损的命运共同体。中方坚持支持多边主义，愿做生物多样性多边进程的积极参与者和贡献者。2021年，中国即将担任生物多样性公约第15次缔约方大会的主席国。我们期待与国际社会协同发力，共同树立尊重自然、顺应自然、保护自然的理念，引领全球绿色发展，为扭转生物多样性下降的趋势做出贡献。谢谢大家。
Some very encouraging signs there from our political leaders. Now for our penultimate set of films, we turn to conservation experts, Indigenous leaders, scientists and technologists. The next segment covers a broad range of nature-based solutions, mostly protection and restoration activities from forests to mangroves, from Mozambique to Brazil. We will hear powerful stories from Indigenous leaders in Canada and Peru, leading efforts to protect and restore ecosystems in ways that can be scaled up all over the world. To complement traditional knowledge, the science of nature-based solutions is evolving daily, and we will hear from a colleague of mine at the Nature Conservancy who has worked with many other organizations to publish new, exciting forest science this week. I hope you enjoy the films.
Intact forests are an irreplaceable nature-based solution, holding immense and unique value for the climate and life on Earth. These great forests of the world are a massive carbon sink for Earth, absorbing around 1/4 of humanity's carbon emissions each year. We simply cannot meet our climate goals without them. They also enhance ecological resilience and are essential to the survival of indigenous and traditional communities around the world. And yet, these great forests are increasingly being logged, burned, and overhunted just when we need them most, degraded at a rate over twice that of global deforestation. From on-the-ground action to policy change at the global level, we must act now to protect intact forests and safeguard a livable future for all life on our planet.
Hi, my name is Shauna Morgan Seegers. My Indigenous nation is Waskaganish Cree Nation, and I'm with the Indigenous Leadership Initiative. I asked for and was gifted a message to bring to you today. The most important thing is for us to work together. The task at hand is enormous, much greater than any of us can take on as individuals or even separate nations. It is what we do as a collective that will matter. 15 years ago, I spoke with a young man from Taku River Tlingit, Trevor Williams, about climate change. He spoke about how the earth has been disrespected. He also shared what he'd been taught, that if you take something from the land, that you have a responsibility to give something back. Indigenous nations from across Canada are leading a movement of Indigenous-led conservation. Together, we are honoring our cultural responsibilities to care for the land and working with others to give back to the earth for all the gifts that we've been given. Many Indigenous nations are doing this by creating Indigenous protected and conserved areas. These places reflect our laws and cultures. We are protecting lands on a sweeping scale across the boreal forest. 3 Indigenous protected and conserved areas have been established since 2018, which collectively protect areas larger than Switzerland. But that's not all. Indigenous nations are leading proposals for over 25 other Indigenous protected and conserved areas. Not far from where I live, 5 Indigenous nations have come together to propose the Seal River Watershed Indigenous Protected Area. It's a beautiful place, home to herds of caribou, millions of migratory birds, beluga whales, and polar bears. It has nurtured Indigenous peoples for millennia. It will conserve 50,000 square kilometers. Protecting this area will keep 640 million tons of carbon in the ground. That's the equivalent of 4 years' worth of Canada's annual greenhouse gas emissions. This makes me hopeful for our future. Indigenous-led conservation is helping combat climate change and loss of biodiversity. It is also helping Indigenous people heal from colonization. It is empowering nations to become stronger. We have an opportunity to do good on so many levels. We can do it by placing Indigenous-led conservation at the heart of Canada's strategy for conservation and nature-based climate solutions. This is our opportunity to work collectively to give back for all we've been given. Miigwech.
¿A la fecha ha habido alguna alerta posterior a nuestra visita?
Ya no
ha habido más.
No había más nada ya. Esas talas de madera también que hubo, ya paralizó. El primer paso es el monitoreo. Ahora estamos al segundo paso ya creciendo.
¿Qué vas a sembrar, hermano? Castaña.
Querer recuperar las cosas, pero ya muchos años se ha perdido.
Pueden reforestar, ¿ya? ¿Han entendido? Pueden reforestar.
Vamos a tomar foto a la plantita para ver la coordenada y la altura.
Es importante evidenciar para que el mundo y todos los financieros vean que nosotros estamos haciendo, no solamente deforestamos, también estamos reforestando. Entonces yo creo que con esta iniciativa vamos a hacer una réplica en las demás comunidades.
Hi, I'm Dr. Susan Cook-Patton. I'm a senior forest restoration scientist at the Nature Conservancy. I once worked with over 100 citizen scientists to plant 20,000 trees within the Chesapeake Bay watershed. We worked dawn to dusk to plant this really amazing reforestation experiment, but it was a lot of work and I would be so tired at the end of the day that I would practically fall asleep in my dinner plate. And after all that work, do you know which trees grew the best? It was not the ones we planted. It was the ones that came up from the rootstock or blew in from adjacent forest. And that was my aha moment where I realized, oh, sometimes nature doesn't need us. Sometimes forests can grow back perfectly well on their own. And of course, there will still be times when we need to plant trees. But now I always ask first, do we need to plant trees? Or can we simply step aside, harness the power of nature, and let the forest grow? Now, 7 years after planting all of those trees, we have new research coming out that maps how quickly forests can recover across the globe without human help. It was still a lot of work. It took 3 years, required sifting through 11,000 publications and involved the efforts of over 31 scientists from across 20 different organizations around the globe. But now we have this amazing map that shows how forests can recover at remarkable rates given the right conditions, capturing carbon as they go. And that rate of carbon capture does vary over 100-fold across the globe. So this map is now freely available for people to use who are interested in trying to find those locations with the greatest climate mitigation potential from natural forest regrowth. If you want it, it's on Global Forest Watch. Check it out. We are learning more and more about nature every day, and research like this helps us figure out how we can use nature now as a solution to climate change. Thanks.
Hi, I am Mauricio Bianco, and I'm the Vice President at Conservation International in Brazil. But I'm here today representing other organizations in my country, such as WRI, WWF, and TNC. We're seeing the planet suffocating. The fires are in full power. This means that millions of hectares of forests are being lost, and therefore, millions of tons of carbon are being emitted to the atmosphere. People are starting to feel fumes in their homes, in the US, in Australia, in Brazil. Forests like the Amazon are already close to the tipping point. But we know that more than 30% of the solution to the climate crisis is in nature. And restoration of forests is a great part of the solution. To that end, Conservation International, the World Resource Institute Brazil, the Nature Conservancy, and WWF Brazil are joining efforts and aligning strategy to scale up forest landscape restoration in Brazil as a way to ensure environmental services, removing CO2 from the atmosphere, strengthening local communities, and promoting human well-being. Our goal is to coordinate government's efforts, innovation in finance, enabling public policies, apply research and development for native species, partnering with traditional communities, private sector, and grassroots organizations by strengthening protected areas and doing all this through science and technology. This is an urgent need to bring restoration efforts together with conservation to build landscape-level resilience. And the cost of this intervention can be reduced by working with nature. We will only be able to do this through partnerships, from a joint effort to support implementation of these initiatives, together with regional initiatives such as the Alliance for Restoration in the Amazon, the Pact for Restoration of the Atlantic Forest, to local initiatives and many people and organizations who know that part of the solution is in nature. It's not only about the biodiversity and climate, but also about jobs, livelihoods, safety, well-being. It's about our future. Growing trees is the only technology available to remove carbon from the atmosphere in large scale. It's not too late, but we must act now, together. Join us in a global movement to restore our forests. Thank you.
So I'm just blown away by the range of stories we saw there, stories of hope. Lastly, we wanted to show you activities that relate to the business end of nature-based solutions. What do an asset manager, a farmer, a forestry investor, and a credit card executive have in common? Aside from one fabulous dinner party, in this case, it is that every one of these people and organizations behind them understands the business case for investing in nature-based solutions, and they're putting their money where their mouths are. We start with a great initiative from the World Business Council for Sustainable Development in the tropical savanna region of Brazil's Cerrado.
There is a big urgency with the Cerrado. We're seeing deforestation at a very rapid rate, actually more than the Amazon.
Farmers plant crops, they sell crop, and they receive money for the crop. If they protect forests, they receive zero.
If you want to make a difference on the carbon emission, if you go to a farmer, say you need to change something, you need to have a business case.
What we need to do is rethink our system and evaluate how can we create value for those that are protecting our forest, the forest for us.
The objective of the program is to incentivize the adoption of regenerative agricultural practices. We're using a model called ICLF, which integrates cropping, livestock, and forestry. And this system has many benefits for the farmer. However, the farmer needs an upfront investment.
Carbon finance is exactly the missing piece today.
Finance, food, and forests. So those are the three F's. We need to be able to provide much more food in a way that is consistent with the rules of nature.
We need help from banks who have patient and purposeful capital because these systems have a longer-term payback.
Ganhar aumento de produtividade.
Exatamente. Esse é o objetivo.
This model actually enhances carbon sequestration through increasing soil organic material so that we can mitigate climate change and transform farms into carbon sinks.
This is about integrating business. You can be part of this and understand how can you better connect with nature to find new solutions for climate.
I'm Theo de Jager. I'm the president of the World Farmers Organization and a farmer in the Limpopo province of South Africa. COVID has taught us that we can live without most of the things we thought were indispensable in our lives. But we cannot live without food. And food is produced on farms, there, on the very nexus of light and energy and climate and soil and water and inputs and technology. We as farmers are extremely sensitive towards the needs of Mother Nature because we are the ones who eke out a living with our fingers in the soil. You don't need to convince farmers that the climate is changing. We see it every day. It's our livelihoods that depend on Mother Nature. This is why in the World Farmers Organization, we have launched the Climakers program, which takes us into every corner of the globe, where we get farmers together and we ask them, what do you think on your farm you can do to tread a little lighter across your pastures and to make a smaller footprint across your fields? We want to go one step further. We have this dream of sequestrating measurably 1 trillion tons of carbon, which will take our atmosphere back to the condition it was prior to the Industrial Revolution. And if you think this dream is too big, well, if your dreams do not scare you, they are not big enough, then you must dream over. It can be done. It would be possible if all farmers across the globe join forces. And we want to do that. It's only us who can do that. Yes, on every farm in this world, everything starts with healthy soils. It's the biggest investment any farmer can make, no matter what you farm with. So whether you go north or west or south or east, you will hear the commitment of the farmers' constituency. Nature now.
Hi, my name is Mark Wishney. I lead Landscape Capital, a new venture of the BTG Pactual Timberland Investment Group and BTG Impact. When I started in forestry as a student at the University of Washington 25 years ago, working on a fire crew was an exciting summer job for my college friends, a chance to travel to hotspots around the US. At that time, the rare fire in Washington State was a curiosity, but rarely a tragedy. A warming planet and a long history of poor fire management have changed all that. We've averaged more than 300,000 acres burned per year in Washington over the last 4 years, a 50-fold increase since I was in school. For me, this is powerful motivation to build more resilient communities and landscapes through the deployment of natural climate solutions at scale. So earlier this year, I left my position as director of the Global Forestry Program at the Nature Conservancy, one of the world's largest and most effective environmental NGOs, to launch Landscape Capital. At Landscape, we seek to leverage the scale and operational capacity of BTG Pactual, one of Latin America's largest investment banks, to offer financial returns while delivering outsized climate, social, and environmental benefits. We believe it's possible to create gigatons of CO2 benefit from profitable investments in the protection and restoration of natural forests and planting sustainably managed commercial tree farms whose carbon can be stored in long-lived applications and whose products can substitute for carbon-intensive alternatives like concrete and steel. Over the next 5 years, we aim to deploy more than $1 billion in new investment into forest conservation and restoration, sustainable commercial tree planting, and the manufacture of climate-positive forest products. But we think it's important to recognize that delivering on the promise of natural climate solutions requires changes in how we manage land and forests at truly massive scales. We have to recognize that the billions of dollars in new capital we hope to invest in rural landscapes also risks dislocation and displacement of vulnerable communities and harm to biodiversity. The global NCS project will fail if it runs counter to the needs and interests of rural peoples. Inclusion is not just a moral imperative, it's also a pragmatic business imperative. We won't build back a perfect world, but we won't have a chance of success if we don't build back a more inclusive, equitable, and resilient one. So thank you for participating in today's webinar, and we invite you to join us, to join all of us. Nature now.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are based. My name is Martin Burke, and I'm a partner at the Pollination Group, a specialist climate change advisory investment firm with offices in Europe, the United States, and Australia. With the name Pollination, you probably already imagine that we believe that national-based solutions can play a central role in combating climate change while delivering multiple benefits across other sectors. I joined Pollination quite recently from the European Investment Bank, where I worked on many early-stage nature-based projects and initiatives. While these generated great impact, they all had one challenge to further grow this market, and that is scale. You will hear a lot today why we need more investments in nature-based solutions, but in our view, the main obstacle is that we do not have enough scalable investment offerings for investors. This is why Pollination has partnered with HSBC Global Asset Management to form a joint venture to create HSBC Pollination Climate Asset Management. This joint venture intends to be a large-scale natural capital manager with the goal to mainstream natural capital as an asset class. With this, we want to offer institutional investors a wider exposure to global natural capital themes in both emerging and developed markets through the creation of private funds. We believe that natural capital allows investors to achieve financial returns through an impact-focused approach at scale. From our perspective, the time is absolutely right for that. We are aware that we cannot do this alone, and this is why we partner with HSBC Global Asset Management, and we hope to be able to partner with many of you so that nature-based solutions can reach their potential. Thank you very much.
I'm Christina Cloverdance, Chief Sustainability Officer at MasterCard. From Kilimanjaro to across the Gobi Desert to the peaks of the Himalayas, nature has always played a very significant role in my life. At MasterCard, we've been focused on moving 500 million people into the formal economy. We did that this year, and we've committed to 500 more, 1 billion people. That's the same population that are the most vulnerable to the effects of climate change. And now we get to address both. By investing in nature, we're able to drive benefit to climate, but also community and biodiversity. At MasterCard, our own environmental footprint is not that significant. We're a payments company, but we have a chance to drive real change when we engage our network effect. And so earlier this year, we launched the Priceless Planet Coalition. And along with our partners, we've committed to regrow 100 million trees over the next 5 years. Along with the expertise of Conservation International and WRI, we've created the effort to be global, to demonstrate restoration at scale, to focus on projects that have the greatest global need and can drive the greatest benefits to climate, community, and biodiversity. But we know it's going to take all of us, government, business, and consumers, working together with urgency for people and nature. And that's what the Priceless Planet Coalition is all about.
A big thank you to everyone who contributed to our Momentum in Nature films there. And thank you very much to those of you who've stuck with us throughout. For every film we've shown, there are thousands more stories out there of individuals, communities, organizations, and governments, all striving to put nature and climate at the heart of the post-COVID recovery. Last but not least, we turn to our final speaker today, a critical Nature for Climate partner, Please welcome the CEO of Conservation International, M. Sanjayan.
Thank you, Lucy. Great to be here, and really appreciated all the amazing words from all the speakers that have come before me, as well as the films that were provided. It really is incredible to see the enthusiasm and the collaborative nature of the work that we are now doing in the Nature for Climate space, in the Nature for Climate Hub. I'm going to try and sort of summarize or synthesize what we've heard so far and give you some closing thoughts. Look, I didn't grow up in the United States, even though right now I'm here in Arlington, just outside of Washington, D.C. I grew up in Asia, in South Asia, in Sri Lanka, and in West Africa, in Sierra Leone in particular. As a child, nature was quite literally all around me. We lived in a very rural environment in Sierra Leone. And you could see how the role that nature played in the lives of the farmers, the fisher folks, the honey gatherers, the medicinal plant healers, even the hunters. You could see it. But for me, growing up in that environment, I never really fully appreciated the value nature was playing in my life, in our lives. You know, to me, it always felt like protecting nature, saving nature. Restoration really wasn't in our minds at the time, but protecting nature was really a hobby, something that you would do after you had a real job. It is incredible to see that in that time, in the 40 years or so since I was a child, you know, we've seen this shift, that the world has woken up, maybe belatedly, but certainly woken up to the fact that nature plays an incredible role in all of our lives. It underpins our economy, it keeps us safe, it provides climate resilience, it gives us the crops that we need to feed our families, it gives us the water that we drink. That realization really has come to the forefront. And this year, unfortunately, and really as the Honorable Lord Goldsmith put it, you know, has been a sad, painful wake-up call. The spread of COVID has really confirmed, certainly to me, and I think to really everyone, that protecting nature is really about protecting ourselves. Our scientists have recently published a study working with loads of other people about how protecting and restoring nature is the key to preventing future pandemics. You could reduce the risk of future pandemics by about a third and save ourselves enormous amounts of money in terms of the recovery just by protecting nature. So it is confirmed for us what we, I think, have always felt, that, you know, protecting nature is ultimately about saving ourselves, and the same can be true, can be said for climate change as well. Look at the films that we just saw. Look at the partnerships that we just heard about. From companies supporting indigenous peoples, paying for the restoration of tropical forests in South America, to NGOs partnering with local communities to conserve mangroves in places like Mozambique, to governments focusing on trying to protect what we would consider irrecoverable sources of carbon. You know, areas in the planet that if we lose them, we put so much carbon in the atmosphere that we can never reach the climate targets that we have to reach and that we have set for ourselves since Paris. Obviously, we have to transition from fossil fuels. And what is incredible to see is the momentum of that transformation, the speed of that transformation. I mean, almost every day you can turn on the news, you can read a paper, you can turn on your computer and find a new commitment, a new pledge of moving away from a carbon, a fossil fuel-based economy. California today announced this unbelievably ambitious plan to basically stop selling cars that are fueled by fossil fuel, not in some distant future, but certainly by the time, you know, my kid wants to go to college and is asking me to help them get a car. So that is quite impressive to see that. It's also incredible to see the momentum that we're gathering with natural climate solutions. Jennifer mentioned that, you know, when we first started talking about this, you know, less than 3% was going into this. Today, now we're seeing 8% or so of funding going towards natural climate solutions. And companies are taking notice. So the private sector is really leaning into this. And that really does give me some sense of optimism. You heard about the commitment from Amazon. You heard about the Priceless Planet coalition that MasterCard is building. But just this June, Apple announced an ambitious plan to protect, restore, and better manage forests at scale. Just this week, Walmart announced an incredibly ambitious plan to protect, restore, and improve the management on 50 million acres of land and 1 million square miles of ocean. These are really, really ambitious pledges. When we think about what we now need to do as a coalition, as a group of partners who care deeply about the planet and deeply about the role of natural climate solutions in changing the trajectory of the planet, I think we have an obligation to really do three things. The first is that we all have to agree and work hard on defunding deforestation. You cannot do one thing on one side and continue to do bad things on the other. We absolutely have to point the spotlight on bad actors and call out companies, governments, policies when we see them slacking on getting rid of deforestation, particularly from our supply chain. There should be no reason why we need to be cutting forests, particularly primary forests, particularly carbon-rich forests, in order to grow food. Second, we must promote equity and social justice in all the work that we do. And I'll come back to that in just a second. It is clear that the people who live on the front lines of nature, the people who are dealing with climate change, the people who are going to bear the brunt of the challenges of our planet, deserve the support and the attention that we can provide. And that our benefits that come from protecting nature, from protecting climate, really does need to accrue to indigenous peoples, local communities, others who have been historically marginalized, because they're the best stewards for the land, and they're the ones who are bearing the brunt of the climate crisis. And to link to that, thirdly, we must prioritize natural climate solutions within all of our economic recovery packages. Here is why. Here's why. When you protect nature for climate, you get the benefits immediately. Immediately. It's cost effective. As Mauricio, who runs our Brazil program, put it, it is the only technology we have that can really scale in terms of sucking up and holding on to carbon. And incredibly importantly, the benefits accrue to local communities and indigenous peoples. As well as, to make natural climate solutions possible, you have to engage local communities and indigenous peoples. So it is probably the most pro-people method we have of blunting climate change. And the cost and the co-benefits are massive in terms of biodiversity, in terms of water, in terms of a healthy environment. So I'll just close by saying I'm so glad to be part of this coalition. I want to thank Lucy and the rest of the organizers for putting all of this together. I want to urge all of us, all of you, to continue to work together. Every great idea we heard today was never from one single organization. It was always from a coalition of organizations, 2, 3, 4, 5 organizations joining together to tackle a part of the climate crisis. Keep working together, keep working collaboratively. We've come a long way since Paris, when natural climate solutions was really on the sidelines. And I really look forward to connecting with you, hopefully in person, in the UK, to make sure natural climate solutions is front and center of Lord Goldsmith and the rest of the COP's agenda. Thank you.
Hello, hola, bonjour y bienvenidos. Welcome to the virtual Nature for Life Hub. My name is Daniel Perez, and it is my distinct pleasure to be your guide for the next 4 days of conversation, engagement, and most of all, commitment to action around nature. Today, we open our multi-day event with a focus on the ways in which nature underpins the Sustainable Development Goals, which is why today is called the SDG Day. Without further ado, let me officially announce the start of the Nature for Life Hub with our first session, Nature for Climate, highlighting the role of nature in climate change mitigation and adaptation. Enjoy! Hello,